Gjörðu svo vel. Virðulegu andmælendur, distinguished opponents, ágæta doktorsefni og góðir gestir. Í dag fer fram doktorsvörn við Menntavísindasvið Háskóla Íslands, þar sem Sara Margrét Ólafsdóttir mun verja doktorsritgerð sína, Children's Play in Peer Cultures, Icelandic Preschool Children's Views on Play, Rules in Play and the Role of Educators in their Play. Eða á íslensku, leikur barna í leikskólum, viðhorf íslenskra leikskólabarna til leiks, reglna í leiks og hlutverk leikskólakennara í leik þeirra. Doktorsritgerðin hefur verið metin hæf til varnar samkvæmt reglum Menntavísindasviðs Háskóla Íslands. Ég heiti Kolbrún Þorbjörg Pálsdóttir og forseti Menntavísindasviðs og býð ykkur hjartanlega velkomin til þessarar athafnar. En doktorsgráða er æðsta menntagráða sem háskólar veita og þess vegna er þessi dagur mikil hátíðisdagur innan Menntavísindasviðs Háskóla Íslands. Doktorsnámið er í höndum sviðsins sameiginlega en þessi doktorsvörn fer fram frá deild kennslu og menntunarfræði. Og því fel ég forseta þeirra deildar, Jónínu Völu Kristinsdóttur, að taka við og stýra athöfninni. Gerðu svo vel.
Ágæta doktorsefni, góði gestir, virðulega andmælendur, distinguished opponents. Doktorsnefndin hefur nú skilað áliti til Menntavísindasviðs þar sem fram kemur að hún telur verkinu lokið, ritgerðina fullgerða og vinnuna fullnægjandi. Andmælendur við vörnina eru Dr. Elizabeth Unroot, prófessor við University of Sheffield, og Dr. Bert van Oers, professor emeritus við Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam. Doktorsvörnin fer þannig fram að fyrst kynnir doktorsefnið rannsókn sín í stuttu erindi og fær 30 mínútur til þeirrar kynningar. Síðan tekur fyrri andmælandi til máls og ræðir efni og gildi doktorsritgerðarinnar og þeirra vinnu sem að baki henni liggur. Hann spyr doktorsefnið síðan út í einstök atriði varðandi rannsóknarvinnuna og innihald verksins. Þá tekur síðari andmælandi til máls á sama hátt. Vörnin felst í vísindalegum umræðum doktorsefnis og begge andmælinda það sem doktorsritgerðin fjallar Tíminn sem áætlaður er til þessar umræðu er alltaf 2 klukkustundum. Eftir að andmælendur hafa lokið máli sínu, víkja sviðsforseti, deildarforseti og andmælendur úr sal og ákveða hvort doktorsefni hefur staðist vörnina. Eða ekki. Niðurstaðan er síðan tilkynnt áheyrendum. Sara Margrét Ólafsdóttir útskrifast sem leikskólakennari árið 2003 frá Háskóla Íslands og lauk þar meistaraprófi í menntunar og kennslufræði yngri barna árið 2013. Sara Margrét starfaði sem leiðbeinandi í leikskóla samhliða grunnnáminu og að því loknu sem leikskólakennari til ársins 2013, þegar hún hóf doktorsnám. Sara Margrét hefur tekið þátt í rannsóknarverkefnum sem tengjast leikskólastarfi, bæði hérlendis og erlendis. Hún hefur meðal annars verið þátttakandi í samstarfsrannsóknum á vegum Rannung, rannsóknarstofu í menntunarfræðum ungra barna, rannsóknarteymi sem nefnist POET, Pedagogics of Educational Transitions, auk þess doktorsverkefni hennar var hluti af rannsókn sem framkvæmd var í Ástralíu. Sara Margrét starfar nú sem stundakennari við Menntavísindasvið Háskóla Íslands og aðstoðar við rannsóknir í alþjóðlegu rannsóknarteymi The Politics of Belonging. Sara Margrét fæddist í Reykjavík þann 11. júlí 1974 en er nú að flytja á Akranes þessar mundir. Hún á 3 börn, þau Elísu, Ólaf Þór og Viktor Orra og er í sambúð með Smára Viðari Guðjónssyni. Aðalleiðbeinandi var Dr. Jóhanna Einarsdóttir, prófessor á Menntavísindasviði. Meðleiðbeinandi var Dr. Susan Danby, prófessor við Queensland University of Technology. Auk þeirra satt í doktorsnefnd Marianne Theobald, lektor við Queen's.
The thesis is Children's Play in Peer Cultures, Icelandic Preschool Children's Views on Play, Rules in Play, and the Role of Educators in their Play. This study was conducted in collaboration with Queensland University of Technology in Australia and supported by the doctoral grant of the University of Iceland. And here is an overview of the presentation. First, I will outline the background and aim of the study. Next, the theoretical framework, previous studies, and research questions. Then I will discuss the methodology, methods, and ethical issues regarding the study. And at the end, I will reflect on the main findings, contribution of the study, and possible further research. In the last 2 decades, the quantity of research with, rather than on, children has increased. Children are being offered more opportunities to be active participants in research processes and have their multiple voices included. Even though we can learn about children's activities through the narratives of others, including parents and teachers, we can deepen our knowledge of childhood by including children in the research process. It is with this intention in my doctoral study that I have chosen to include the voices of children and bring forth their views and ideas about their play activities in their peer cultures. Research on children's views on play has indicated that children do not define their activities in the same way as adults. While educators might value children's learning through play, the children might think differently and say that they only play a short amount of time during the day. Because of this possible variation, it is important to gain a better understanding on how children explain their activities in preschool. Children's play activities include several rules made by educators and the children themselves. These rules often are taken for granted with little attention as to whether some children may benefit and others do not. For this reason, this study also focuses on how children experience rules within their peer cultures. Additionally, while the role of educators is important in children's play, there is a fine line between educators participating in children's play and them controlling it. If educators take control over children's activities, then children tend to think that their activity is not play. The findings suggest that why it's critical to investigate children's perspectives regarding the role of educators in their play. And the aim of the study is to gain a better understanding of how children explain their activities in their preschool settings, how they experience rules in their play activities, and how they see the roles of educators in their play. Underpinning the study are views of children as competent and active participants in co-constructing their social worlds. These views are connected to childhood studies that emphasize children as active in shaping and constructing their own cultures through their experiences, knowledge, and collective actions. This study is also informed by the Convention of the Rights of the Child, that emphasizes children's rights to express themselves in matters that affect their lives and that they are active participants in society. And built on the perspective that children's play and learning in preschool is socially constructed by the children and adults, this takes the study into the educational arena. The theoretical framework chosen for the study is Corsaro's theory of the sociology of childhood. Corsaro's main concepts are interpretive reproduction, children's peer cultures, and primary and secondary adjustment. Now I will explain the meaning of these concepts. Interpretive reproduction is a term that refers to children's participation in society and the cultures that they create by appropriating information from the adult world. Corsaro uses the concept interpretive to describe the creative and innovative aspects of children's participation in society. Reproduction captures the idea that children actively contribute to cultural production and change. That is, children are affected by society and cultures, and they are also active participants in shaping and creating their society and cultures. In this study, the term interpretive reproduction is used in a similar way as Sara did in his studies. However, the focus is mainly on the children's competences and social agency, thus having their own opinions, experiences, and knowledge. Peer cultures are context for children where they change and grow understandings of the community by using their experiences, meanings, and actions to contribute to the society. In peer cultures, children are likely to share norms, attitudes, and values that they express in their play and other activities. Sara defines peer culture as a stable set of activities or routines, artifacts, values, and concerns that children produce and share in interaction with peers. In children's peer cultures, protection of interactive space is one of their concerns. Protection of interactive space indicates that children who are already involved in an activity resist the access attempts of other children. Protection of interactive space is an important concept in the study because it is used to look closer into children's participation in play in peer cultures. The concept of primary and secondary adjustment explain how peer culture can emerge. Primary adjustment means that adults have the role of controlling children's behavior. In this view, children are told what to do, for example, to obey the adult and adjust behavior accordingly. In this study, the concept of primary adjustment is used as a lens to explore how children adjust to and follow educators' authority and rules in their peer culture. And secondary adjustment, however, is related to how children seem to be under control of adults by adjusting and following the rules, but actually they are undertaking a collective form of resistance. This is seen often in preschool when children ignore or exclude other children from play, even though the rule says that everybody should be included. In this study, the concept of secondary adjustment is used to shed light on how children respond to or resist adult authority in their play activities in peer cultures. Play has been studied from different perspectives and paradigms, providing important information about the phenomenon. However, the definition of children's play has often been controversial, and there remains no consensus about the definitions or activities of play. Researchers building their studies of children's play on Vygotskian theory suggest that children are playing when they take on and act out roles, create an imaginary situation, and follow rules relevant for the play and the role. To this day, definitions of children's play remain unclear and need further exploration from children's viewpoints. Research that has included children's perspectives on their activities in the preschool has shown that various aspects need to be in place for children to explaining their activity as play. Children have used various concepts to explain the phenomenon of play. For example, children have defined informal activities in which they use their imagination, take roles, and are in control as play. This study will add to the understanding of children's play, where the children themselves explain the activities in the preschool context. Educators' cultural values affect their views of children's play and learning in preschools. Educators' views of play influence how much freedom children have, how they can participate, which rules are presented, and how they should be followed. Rules have been described as cultural resources to which members orient in order to make sense of their social worlds. The purpose of making rules is often to guide the member of a culture towards appropriate behavior. This study will investigate how adult-initiated rules influence the activities of the preschools and how children challenge rules in the play in the peer culture. Children's views on the role of educators in the play indicate that they often connect play with the absence of adults. The educators seldom participate in their play. Usually, the educators stand in the background and observe, support, and help the children when they need it. Even though children connect play to the absence of educators, they also want them to be nearby for assistance. This study can add a deeper understanding of the educator's role in children's play by discussing not only when, but also how the children want the educators to take part in their play. And these are the research questions. The first question is, what characterizes activities in preschool that the children consider play and non-play? The second question is, how do the children experience adult-initiated rules in their preschool settings, and how do they challenge these rules in their play activities? And the third question is, how do the children view the role of educators in their play activities? This study was conducted with children aged 3 to 6 years in 2 preschools in Reykjavík, Ravenswood and Butterfly, names chosen by the participating children. The first preschool, Ravenswood, 18 out of 20 children and 4 educators participated. The children had approximately 1 hour for play or freely chosen activities in the morning, which was the time the study would mainly focus on. Activities often observed involved puzzles, drawing, building Lego, and playing board games. That is, the children were often observed sitting at tables. In the Butterfly preschool, 28 children out of 32 and 5 educators participated. Here, the children had more time for freely chosen activities, up to 2 to 3 hours uninterrupted. In this setting, the children's choice of activities often involved unit blocks, hollow blocks, clothing and dressing, household equipment, plastic animals, dolls, and drawing. I want to mention that the educators did not participate directly in the research, but they were a part of the situation that the research was conducted in. A multiple case study drawing on an ethnographic approach was used in the study, investigating the phenomenon of play in 2 preschool settings. A combination of these approaches were used because of the importance for the researcher to learn about the culture of the settings and create a trusting relationship with the participants. The methods used in this study were video-stimulated accounts, which involved video recordings of the children's everyday activities and video-recorded interviews with the children. Video-stimulated accounts were chosen because the recordings could capture children's activities. Then the children could watch the recordings, explain their activities, and interpret the actions of other children and educators. Field notes were written on a regular basis during the research process. The field notes helped me to reflect on the children's and educators' interactions, and no less importantly, my interactions with the children. And thematic analyses were used to analyze the data from both preschools. Ethical issues were considered in every level of the research process. All gatekeepers gave their approval or consent, and the children were gatekeepers in their own account. The children were informed about the research in a child-friendly way so that they would know what was expected of them. The children who decided to participate in the study gave their written assent. The children chose synonyms for their preschool and themselves to better understand my duty of confidentiality. And the children's informed assent was ongoingly sought throughout the entire research process, and I was aware of children's different ways of communicating their assent or dissent, both verbally and physically. The findings were introduced to the children, offering them an opportunity to share their opinions on the findings. and I took on a least adult role to make power relationship between me and the children more equal. Thus, my role was different from other adults in the setting. In the participating preschools, the children were used to having preschool teachers and parents present, but not researchers. I am a preschool teacher who took on the role of a researcher. I emphasized that, as a student, I was curious about the children's activities and wanting to learn from them. I emphasized that I wanted to participate in the children's activities on their own terms. I learned the rules of the setting from the children, and often I sought their advice about what to do and when. I never directed the children on what they could or could not do. At the beginning of the research fieldwork, I recognized the children's interest of showing me their preschool environment and explaining to me how things worked there. The children's interest in teaching me about their preschool activities kept on throughout the research process and was evident when they explained to me the topic of the research. And now to the main findings of the study. The aim of the study was to contribute new understandings to studies of children's play in peer cultures and their views of the role of educators in what the children described as play. During the research process, I also found it important to delve more in depth into children's views of rules in their peer culture, because the application of rules seemed to influence the children's involvement in play activities. 3 articles were published to discuss these topics, based on the findings of the study. The findings from the first study indicated both shared and different views on children's activities in the preschool settings. First, the children said that play had a preparation phase, where they set the stage, decided which roles to play, and who could participate in the play. When the preparation was done, the actual play could begin. That is, the preparation of the play was not explained as play by the children. Most of the children suggested that drawing was different from playing, that drawing could be a playful activity, but that it was not play. However, there was a contrast in the children's explanation where 2 children said that the activity of painting was play. The children explained how different ways of using the material in the setting could influence if they viewed their activities as play or non-play. At Ravenswood, I had a discussion with 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls, about how they viewed their activities in their preschool setting. The children had chosen to use domino blocks on the floor, and they had different opinion on the activity. In the video-stimulated conversation with the children, the girls said that they were not playing because they were just arranging the blocks or lining them up. The boys, however, said that they were playing, and they were very adamant in their discussion about this activity. The extract on the slide is an example of the video-stimulated conversation with the children, where Guðmundur explained to me why the boys think the activity of using domino blocks is play. And I asked the boys, "Why do you think this is play?" And Guðmundur answers, "Because you can decide what to do with it, and these blocks could be men and something." And I asked, "So you think maybe there needs to be men for this to be play?" And Guðmundur says, "Yes, the blocks can be men. This is also a game." This example shows that for Guðmundur, acting out roles was important in order for the activity to be called play. Also, he needed to be able to make decisions about what to do with the material, for example, changing the blocks into men or something else. These characteristics of children's play are in accordance with how children's make-believe play has been described. That is, the children suggested that they were playing when they acted out roles and created an imaginary situation. In this study, the children actively contributed to the understanding of their activities in their peer culture. In the second study, when discussing rules in the preschool setting with the children, they mostly mentioned rules made by the educators. These rules were often related to behavior, the use of material, number of children in areas, and exclusion from the peer group. The children saw themselves either learning the rules bit by bit, or they were taught by the educators. Primary adjustment was often observed in the setting where the children often followed the educators' rules. However, they also used different strategies in their play to challenge these rules. For example, by excluding children from play, even though the rule said that it was prohibited. In one of the observations in Butterfly Preschool, 2 girls, Selma and Magga, were playing house in the corner of the setting. Selma was in control of the play and could decide who could participate in the play. 3 other girls, Sara, Skoppa, and Una, asked if they could be a part of the play. On the slide is Selma's explanation from the video-stimulated recording of who could play and who could not. And I asked the girls, how do you decide who participates in the play? And Selma said, I decided that Sara could play. And Sara said, I took part. And I said, but why was Skoppa not allowed to participate? And Selma said, because, you know, the educator said that 2 children could join because 2 children had left. And I asked, how many children are allowed to play in the corner? And Selma said, there can always be 4 at a time. And I said, 4 at a time? Who decides how many children can play in each area? And Selma says, the educators. In this conversation, Selma says that Skoppa cannot play because there can only be 4 children in the area at a time, and refers to the educator's rule about amount of children allowed in the area. This is an example of secondary adjustment in the children's peer culture, where Selma manipulated the educator's rules for the purpose of including some children but excluding others from the play, which was also prohibited. Moreover, this example illustrates conflict between rules, both made by the educators, probably with the intention to include children in play and avoid chaos in a small area. However, the rule about 4 children in a play area at one time leads to exclusion. The children sometimes strive to protect their interactive space in the play in the peer culture. Here is an example of how Jóhanna made rules about who could take part in a play activity and who could not. And Skoppa said to me, she did not let me play with them. And I said, no, why not? And Skoppa said to Jóhanna, why did you not let me play with you? And Jóhanna said, because there could only be 3, and if you wanted to take part, you needed to own cats. You could not be the big sister. She always wants to be the big sister. And I asked, so she did not fit into the roles? And Jóhanna said, no, because there could only be 3, and she wanted to be the big sister. The argument made by Jóhanna can be interpreted as 3 rules that indicate who can be a part of the play. That is, there can only be 3 children, you need to own cats, and you cannot be the big sister. There were already 3 children playing, and Skoppa did not own cats, and she always wanted to play the big sister. In the recording, Skoppa went to an educator who was nearby and told her that she was not allowed to participate in the play. The educator reminded Jóhanna of the rule about not excluding other children and said, Jóhanna, we're all playing together, remember? Then Skoppa was allowed to take part in the play, but she could not be the big sister, according to Jóhanna. This is an example of children striving to protect their interactive space where a different role would change what the girls had already underway, as what was evident in Korsaro studies. Moreover, in this study there were conflicts between the educator's rule about including children in play and Jóhanna's rule about being free and owning cats. The educator's rule of not excluding others has more value than Jóhanna's rule, and Skoppa needed to choose a different role from what she usually plays. That is, She liked to play the big sister because she was a big sister in real life. Therefore, Jóhanna's rule about owning cats had more value than Skoppa's wish for being the big sister in the play. The findings from the third study show that the preschool educators seldom took part in the children's play activities. They were often busy doing other things. Their role was often to be close to the children and observe and react when the children needed help or when something went wrong. Play was something the children could usually manage themselves, but sometimes they needed the educator's support, as Elena in Ravenswood pointed out when she said, "We can do it ourselves, but sometimes we need help." This is in line with findings from other studies. The children took on different roles in their play. Some children took the roles of leaders in play, while other children followed these leaders. In addition, some children liked to make joint decisions in their play. The children's status within their peer group influenced how they explained the educator's role in regard to the play. The children who were leaders in the play did not see how the educators could be involved in their play without ruining it. That is, they did not want the educator's input or control. However, the children who followed the leaders sometimes needed the educator's input and support and wanted them to take part in their play, for example, by playing with them. Therefore, this study indicates that social order in peer cultures is not the same for every child. And to the conclusion, the findings of this study suggest that it is important to consult with children about their activities in preschools. When discussing play in preschools, the participating children had their independent views of how they explained their activities, not influenced by the educator's language as other studies have suggested. Most children saw make-believe play as play, where they used their imagination, took on and acted out roles, and were in control of their activities. Therefore, an important aspect of educator's role is to support and maintain the children's imaginary world, because if the imaginary is taken away from the children's activities, they usually do not explain them as play. In the children's make-believe play, there were hidden rules made by the children that often referred to who could be involved in the play and who could not, which roles were appropriate for the play theme, and orders about how to act. The children sometimes challenged the educator's power and control by resisting, challenging, or circumventing the rules in the preschool setting. The children who took the leading position in play adjusted the educator's rules to their play, often to keep control and fulfill their desires and needs. The children made their own rules and orders to maintain or even strengthen their position in the peer group, but at the same time, they might have weakened the position of other children, often the children that were excluded from the play in some way. Therefore, educators need to be aware of the children's position in the peer group, the rules they make themselves and the rules the children make, because the children's status and the rules can lead to exclusion from play activities. I learned very much from my role as a researcher and being a part of the children's peer culture. After I had spent some time with the children in the setting, they invited me to participate in their play. At the same time, the children said that the educators could not play with them because they would ruin the play. I thought about what I had in common with the educators, such as being an adult, a woman, and a preschool teacher. When I thought about our differences, I realized that what differed the most was my role as a researcher, avoiding to take control and give orders. Children's play involves power relationships, and one of the children's explanation of play is that they are in control of their activities, as other researchers has also found. The reason for why I could participate in the children's play could be that I did not hold the same power as the educators, and therefore it was safe for the children to invite me to play with them. The children did not risk losing their power and control losing the power and control of their play to a more powerful person. This study contributes to the research field of early childhood education, where children's perspectives are seen as critical for supporting their play and learning in preschool. By taking on at least adult role, I gained the children's trust and was invited to their peer culture. This study contributes to the research field by adding these video-stimulated conversations to the research process, where the children themselves could plan and interpret their activities. This study adds to the understanding of conflicts between rules made by educators and children. What rules were valued and followed seem to be related to educators' values and beliefs, as other studies have indicated. Rules about inclusion were clear in the preschool settings, but still sometimes the children made their own rules or used the educators' rules to exclude other children from play. Further research is needed to gain a better understanding of the complexity of rules in children's preschool cultures. The children's status in their peer group was a factor that both influenced how the children dealt with adult-initiated rules in the setting and how they viewed the roles of educators in their play. However, children's status in peer groups is not simple, because a child can be a follower in one play activity and a leader in another one. The different status can be explained by the cultural and social knowledge the children bring to the play, and affect how the children can participate in play, such as owning cats so they could attend a play where the children were playing kittens. One of the things that I learned from the children was how they include and exclude other children in their play activities. I believe it is important to add to the knowledge and understanding of inclusion and exclusion in children's peer cultures by conducting more research with children on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Sara Margrét Ólafsdóttir, for this overview of your work. The first official faculty opponent is Dr. Elizabeth Unroot. She is Professor of Education at the University of Sheffield and head of the School of Education. Her research focuses mainly on early childhood and primary education with specific interests in play and pedagogy. Curriculum and assessment in early childhood education teaches professionalism and professional knowledge, policy analysis and critique. Her work on play has international reach and influence, and she is a visiting professor at the University of Auckland and Australian Catholic University, Melbourne. Dr. Wood is currently researching the ways in which children are blending digital and traditional play and the implications for curriculum and pedagogy. She is also looking into understanding the relationships between children's interest, play, and pedagogy in multi-diverse early childhood setting, and researching learning-rich leadership for early childhood leaders. Dr. Wood has worked with a range of European organizations and has provided policy and practice guidance to governments on play, curriculum, pedagogy, and assessment. I'm now pleased to ask Dr. Elizabeth Unroot to begin her evaluation and examination of the thesis. Dr. Elizabeth Unroot, please step to the podium.
It is always a privilege to be asked to examine a PhD thesis, and I thank the committee for the opportunity to do this task on behalf of the University of Iceland. I would also like to thank you for your efficient organisation throughout the process and your warm Icelandic hospitality. Undertaking research for a PhD thesis is important for the individual scholar as a marker of your standing in the field, Sara, and for creating original work that is rigorous in its conceptualization, ethical in its conduct, and critical in its judgment. Doctoral research is also important for the chosen field of scholarship in terms of what new knowledge and understanding is brought to our attention and how this contributes to the development of theory, policy, and practice. As Professor Van Oers and myself are scholars of play, we of course consider the topic to be of sufficient range and complexity for doctoral research. Sometimes when adults think that something is easy to accomplish, we may say, oh, it was just child's play. And I think that Sara and Professor Van Oers would agree that play is not easy, but should be seen as complex social and cultural activity, as Sara's thesis has shown us. This thesis makes it clear why it is important that we understand children's peer cultures, how they organise their play according to their own rules, and some of the complexities that children create and experience in their play. As Sara has shown us, the field of play scholarship is vast in its different disciplinary orientations, methods, and foci. The focus for this PhD research is appropriate and manageable, and although a precise definition of play has been avoided, Sara, as we all do, this thesis provides insights into children's perspectives on their play. Now, this study has been conducted in Iceland with its particular social and cultural history and values about children and preschool education and its particular policy context. However, we are asked to evaluate whether this thesis meets internationally recognised standards. We are also aware that scholars of play and early childhood from a range of disciplinary perspectives are always interested to understand what is happening in different countries and regions of the world. This is all the more so in light of increasing government interventions in early childhood education, where children's freely chosen play may be undervalued as new priorities emerge for educational play and even edu-play. So this thesis is not just about what was observed in 2 preschools in Iceland, but what it might reveal about wider issues in play and in early childhood education internationally. Accordingly, our evaluation has taken this broader international perspective into account, not least because this research was part of an international comparative study. In the 2 published papers that I was able to read in English, there are some indications of the requirements for the national curriculum for preschools in Iceland and the influence of this document on practice. However, this thesis does not directly address any tensions or challenges that the Iceland policy framework presents for children and their educators, and the recommendations in the thesis seem to be a little detached from the policy context. We have organised our questions according to the university's criteria and wish to explore some substantive themes regarding the critical analysis of the literature, the theoretical framing, the methodology, the analysis of the different data sets, and some of the conclusions and recommendations. There are some areas where we ask for clarification and explanation, and some areas that may provoke discussion and debate. And when we met yesterday, Professor Van Oers and I agreed that although we have been researching play for very many years, we are still explorers in this very complex land. So, Sara, we are not expecting correct answers to our questions, but we are expecting you to elaborate and discuss some of the points that we're going to raise. So, we now turn to those questions. Sara, in relation to your thesis, you state in the thesis and in the 2 published papers in English that you analysed the data using codes, and these were organised into categories or emerging themes. And you seem to use categories and themes interchangeably. This description is linked to what you describe as the trustworthiness of the research. However, we saw no account in the thesis of how these categories emerged or were constructed and labelled by you. So given that you have very rich and different forms of data, can you explain how you analysed your data sets? What were the main categories? And did those categories have equal weight, or were some stronger or weaker than others?
Yes, so analyzing the data. So first I familiarized myself with the data, and then I searched for codes. And well, like in the first article when discussing play, I used the word as play as some pretend or play as having control, and and then I found an extract in the I found the extract to explain what I meant.
Okay. So the categories emerged from your data.
Yes, so in 2 of the articles about the play and the role of educators, it was in the data that I looked for it. But when in the second article about rules, the theory helped me to look into the data, and so it was that was the difference between.
So was your analysis inductive or deductive, or a mixture of both approaches?
So it was a mixture of both. So in the 2 articles it was inductive, and then
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think when you come to publish further papers from your work, it's important that other researchers are able to see how you reached your categories, how you define those categories, and how you've worked with those categories in analysing your data.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for you to be able to describe and justify which aspects of your data were analysed inductively and which were analysed deductively, because that helps to show how you are bringing theory to bear, but also how you are bringing the data to bear on the theory as well. Okay. So my next question focuses on the research ethics. And again, as we were talking last night, we agreed that we continue to struggle with the ethics of researching play. And this is because one of the tensions that I've encountered in my work is that play is often the private activity of children, which takes place often in the public setting of a preschool. And I struggle with what are the ethics of making children's play public through our research. So a question that I would like to ask you, and this relates to your dual role as researcher and preschool teacher in another context. What are the ethical considerations of representing children's play to themselves through the stories that you wrote about the children's play through your own perspective?
Yeah. So in preschool, play is, as you say, children play in a public space where the educators are watching and observing the children's play. So it's difficult to say that play in preschool is private. And I saw, of course, I asked the children if I could video record them and if they wanted to watch it, and sometimes they said yes and sometimes they said no, and sometimes they communicated like physically that they didn't want to be a part of the study, and I tried to like watch and listen to children's responses to me being there, and sometimes once I was kicked out of the room when I was there, so they were and so the children, I feel like the children have been like they understood my role and what their rights to opt out, and they did regularly during the research process. And then at the end, I introduced the findings to the children and to see if they were agreed with what I saw. Mm-hmm. So I tried to follow, be honest through the research process and follow ethical issues all the way. And also in my writings, I wanted to bring forth their views of play.
So that's interesting that you've given us some more insights about how your research was not smooth and unproblematic.
No, it wasn't.
I'm interested in how they tried to kick you out of the room. Can you tell me a little bit what happened?
Yeah, so I asked two girls who were in a small room playing with plastic animals. I asked them if I could video record their activity, and they said yes. So I went into the room and started to video record. And then I noticed one of the girls start to whisper in the ear of another girl, and then they kept on playing, and then she kept on whispering. And I asked her if she thought it was uncomfortable that I was video recording, and she said it was okay. And then they kept on playing, and she came to me and looked in the camera and went back to her friend and whispered to her ear. And then it went on for a while, and I asked if they wanted me to turn off the camera, and they said no, so I recorded. And then she started to make noises with the horse, so she was interrupting the recording. So, and then she said, "Can you please turn off the camera now?" And I turned off the camera and just wanted to sit there a bit just to explore what they were doing, even though I had turned off the camera. And the girl went to the door, opened it, and looked at me. So she kicked me out of the room.
Right.
So I feel like they were really knew their rights, and they used their rights if they felt uncomfortable. But I can tell you later, these same girls came, said yes again, and then they were fine with it. Maybe it was their first recording, so maybe they felt it uncomfortable.
That for me is a fascinating episode, Sara, because you write about your research ethics almost in a formulaic way, that having had regard to the rules and the protocols of ethics, that it seems throughout the thesis that ethics was then unproblematic. But you've given us here a fascinating insight into children's disruption. And you give another example in your thesis of the boy who listens to the story that you present to him, and he says, but it wasn't like that. So I would like to ask you to think a little more critically about your research ethics, and particularly the idea of ethics being in the moment, that it is not a set of rules or protocols we implement prior to our work, but ethics is, as it says, ethos is about a way of living. Ethics is something that we live through our research. And I hope that in future publications you might return to those episodes and perhaps present a more problematic or problematized or critical view of the ethics of researching play.
And it is my intention to do so. I really would like to write about the ethics of the study.
Because to present everything as smooth, I think it's like the wind in Iceland, a lot of turbulence.
I found that children's time is also valuable because it made a difference what time I was there, when it's okay to interrupt them, when it's not. I'm not interrupting when they're doing something they really like to do, because then they won't like to talk to me. So I have to be looking into different kind of aspects all the time.
Good. Thank you. And I think it's important to give those ethical messages to future researchers of play so that they can see that it is not always, it's more problematic than it might seem to be researching play because it is so dynamic.
Yes.
Okay. So, my next question turns to some of the claims and recommendations that you have made, both in your thesis and in the 2 published papers in English. So, your stated focus is children's peer cultures in play. However, in your conclusion to your thesis and in your 2 research papers, you make some very strong recommendations for the role of adults. Now, given that your published work will be read in many different countries, can you tell us whether these recommendations are relevant mainly in the context of Iceland, or whether you think they have relevance for other countries?
Well, so cultures are different even between preschools, so my findings is not something that can be generalized to all cultures and countries. But I'm hoping that, when the study is conducted, the culture is homogeneous, so maybe, and I saw in Australia they had different findings from what I saw in my study. So at least I can, it's in relation to Icelandic preschool. But, and I'm hoping that other cultures can learn from what I saw, but I would never generalize into other cultures what I saw here.
Okay, I was wondering whether your reading of the research literature might help you not to generalize, but to make reasonably valid connections between what is happening to play in other cultures.
Yeah. So in one of the preschool, I saw something that is probably happening in more places, and that was many of the activities the children were participating in were not named play by the children. They were all other activities.
Yeah.
So after the children had explained to me what they thought play was, I realized that they were not playing very much in the preschool. So, and this is something we are like, I think we have to watch out for play and the imaginary play, because other activities are coming into the preschool and taking much time from the imaginary play.
Yeah.
So I think that is something we really need to be careful and
in Iceland, or again across an international context, or both?
So both in Iceland, yes, and internationally. I think this is a problem, that other activities are taking more time from children's play. So,
Okay.
and I think, yeah, so I think the imaginary play is really important part of children's preschool.
Okay, thank you. And my last question, again, this is taking more of an overview of your work. In your thesis, you've drawn on different theoretical frameworks. You've told us that your main theoretical framework is sociological, drawn from the work of William Corsaro, but you also touch on some psychological theories because you talk about children learning through play. You also touch on pedagogical theories because you're giving recommendations about the adult's role. So you've told us about your implications for practice. Please, can you tell us what are the implications of your research for theory?
Yeah. So, yeah. So I used Corsaro's theory to look into children's play in peer cultures. And conflicts. My findings were similar to what Corsaro found in his studies, but I saw like more conflicts in the rules and the children's status in the peer culture. How much that was an important part of the children's participation in play. So, and the children that were followers or had a lower status in play, they were more relied on Corsaro's primary adjustment. They were relied on the educators' input and control. But the children that were leaders, they were more in the secondary adjustment, wanting to have control and sometimes challenge the educator's power. And
so based on what you just said, Sara, if William Corsaro were here, would you say to him that you agree with his primary and secondary adjustments, or would you say, and here's how I would extend your theories?
Yeah, I would mainly agree with him, but yeah, and then, yeah.
Is there anything else you would want him to think about?
No, not at this moment, no.
Okay, Sara, thank you very much. And that is the conclusion of my questions. I hand over to Professor Van Oers.
Thank you, Dr. Elizabeth Unroot, for your thorough review and examination of the thesis and the candidate for her replies to the questions posed by the opponent. The second official faculty opponent is Dr. Bert Van Oers. He is Professor Emeritus in Cultural Historical Theory of Education at the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, Faculty of Behavioral and Movement Sciences. Since the 1980s, he is involved in the elaboration, implementation, and evaluation of the developmental education concept based on the cultural historical activity theory. His main research topics and publications are related to this approach, with emphasis on play, early childhood education, mathematics education, literacy education, and music education. He defended his dissertation, Activity and Concepts, in 1987. In 2004, he received an honorary doctorate degree from the University of Jyväskylä in Finland. I'm pleased to ask Dr. Beth Unroot to begin his evaluation and examination of the thesis. Dr. Beth Unroot, please step to the podium.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sara, for your nice presentation in the beginning. It gave me again an overview of your research after I had read the dissertation. It's a nice layout, so it was a pleasure reading it. And thank you for the faculty for inviting me to be an opponent in a research project which is so rich and important. So I will try to contribute to the further thinking about young children's play, peer culture, etc. I will first address your supervisors and the audience, just to explain how I see the dissertation as a whole, and then when it comes to questioning Sara, I will address my questions to you, of course. The research project of Sara addresses an important topic in the research of children's play. The influence of culture on children's development is now widely accepted, even though much research is still needed to explore it further and to get a better grip on what play is and how it varies among different contexts. Studying play may contribute to a better understanding of play, but of course also can help practitioners to improve their classroom interactions with young children. And I think it's the main merit of Sara's research that she has contributed to this research topic with many very rich descriptions of activities and interactions that are going on in the classrooms. Descriptions always help people to imagine new dimensions of activities in classroom beyond the imaginations that we have ourselves. And in her study of peer culture in children's development, she also focused on young children's perceptions and the use of rules in the context of play, taking account of children's perception of adults and adults' role in this process as well. And in my view, good research on how rules function in children's play is a topic of utmost importance. And the candidate, Sara, has shown that it is not simply a matter of imposing rules onto children, asking them to follow the rules. Children themselves have a lot of contribute to what's going on in the classroom, and especially how and when to follow the rules. And I see this focus on rules as one of the potential further merits of Sara's research, but as I will try to explain in the next part of my presentation here, there is still a lot to do about rules, what they are, etc. It's, for example, remarkable that it's not given a clear definition in the dissertation what rules are. and of course to communicate with practitioners and with researchers among themselves, we have to be clear what we are talking about, what we are researching when we say we focus on rules, and especially the rules in play as one of the subtitles of Sara's dissertation says. But writing a dissertation is also an opportunity to show how the writer is evolving into a real academic. And becoming an academic in the first place implies that you try to understand what's going on. And of course, clear and good descriptions are necessary, but in the back of our minds should always be the basic question: how does this innovate my theory or falsify my theory? And I think that is one of the things that I sometimes hesitated about when reading the dissertation. I think it could be stronger, especially on the theoretical part. And notwithstanding the merits that I just pointed out, we have to be critical about research. So, in my view, the main weakness of the candidates' research projects are at the theoretical level, and my main questions are focused at that level: theory and methodology. The acknowledgement of the importance of peers in a child's development is also an interesting point to study. And that's what Sara did. But one of the things that you will see when you observe children, that they are often imposing rules on each other and controlling each other on the basis of rules by saying, for example, no, that's not what a daddy does. That's not true. You have to do it this way, etc. Children are oftentimes inventing and imposing rules themselves among themselves. And this can make a child, it can make play very difficult for some children when they are expelled or abused or whatever. So the focus on peers and peer cultures and what are the rules in that culture, how do children use it when interacting with other children, that's a very important topic. And theoretically, I think there is much more to say about it, but as my colleague, Professor Wood, already said, I'm not expecting that Sara has already solved all problems. We have discussed it yesterday evening. We are actually struggling with the same kind of problems as Sara is. What are rules? How do children use them? And try to conceptualize this in order to improve our communication with practitioners, with other academics. And one thing that I really would have appreciated in this level is that the notion of peer interaction in child development can also be found in the work of Piaget, even in the 1930s. And I think the research project of Sara is a very nice opportunity to demonstrate how much we have improved our thinking on peer culture, peer interaction, the use of rules after the 1930s when Piaget was working on it. So I found it a pity that Sara did not pick up this point to demonstrate how much she could improve what we know about rules and peer cultures after the 1930s. Another thing that I struggled with when reading the thesis was that there are different theoretical concepts like culture, peer culture, competence, learning, etc., that are not really clarified. They are stated as a kind of primitive concepts, but they still need our attention and need further conceptualization. And there are possibilities within the research project to elaborate these notions and contribute to that part of our task as academics that should be our main task, building theories, because theory is a tool that we and practitioners can use in order to do our work. So again, emphasizing how much I admire the research and the research topic and the observations and descriptions Sara did, I cannot dwell too long on these positive parts, but must be more critical, and my questions are mainly focused on a few issues that I think we can discuss further in order to find out whether we can make progress. So I want to start with my questions now, if you are ready for it. Are you ready?
Yes, as can be.
Okay. The main title of your thesis is, it's up there, Children's Play in Peer Cultures. And it suggests a major attention to children as members of a peer culture. And a big part of the research, however, is devoted to adults and how children perceive them. And in the thesis, you clarify the discussions of the adults' participation in children's play, but you do not really clearly explain how your own theoretical view on the role of adults actually is. Is the adult essential for children's peer cultures and play? So my first question, and I think it should be an easy one for you, is could you please explain how the adult's culture should be seen with regard to the children's culture? Are they separate? Is the adult only helping in sometime, but it's a different world? How do you look at this conceptually? What is the position of the adult in both cultures?
Yeah. So in one of the preschools, I found that the peer culture and the adult culture were kind of separated when the children were playing, because the adults did not participate or interfere. They only came when the children asked them or if they needed help. So they It seems like in this culture that play is something the children own, and the children have, yeah. So yeah, I feel like the cultures are a bit separated, and maybe it's because of the power relationship between the adult culture and the peer culture. I guess.
Okay, that could be an answer, but that's an answer I do not accept immediately. When we look at children's play, for example, when they are role-playing,
yeah,
they play school.
Yeah.
They play father and mother.
So you mean how they bring the adult world to their play?
Yeah, but isn't the adult world and the practices they imitate, isn't it part of both the adult and children's culture?
Yes, of course, yeah. So yeah, in their play they use their experience and knowledge often from the adult world to their peer culture, even though the adults are not part of the play, so they use. So maybe that's what you mean?
Would you accept when I say adults are, in a virtual sense, members of children's play?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
so children act like, they like to act like grown-ups.
Sometimes they do.
Sometimes they do.
Yeah,
yes.
but not all the time. Like playing cats or wanting to be the big sister because you just became a big sister and that's you have a new role in your family, so you bring that to your peer culture.
Yeah.
So yeah, but sometimes they play the mom and the dad, and then they bring the adult world into their peer culture. So.
But the sister is also a part of a family.
Of course, it is. Yeah.
So one way or another, the peer culture consists of adult culture elements.
Yeah.
Is that acceptable for you?
Yes, it is.
So I wondered why in your dissertation you systematically kept talking about culture and peer culture and never explained how we should see the relationships between the two of them. Mm-hmm. And probably you disagree, my point would be that the adult is an essential part of children's culture and play.
Essential. Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can investigate, of course, and further explore how the adult should play its role, and children do not accept when it limits their freedom, when it destroys their engagement, etc. So when that happens, when adults tries to be too bossy and regulate the activities of children too much, then children get bored and get out. But still, there is a very deeply and intrinsic relationship between peer culture and culture.
Yeah.
Yeah? Is there anything that you want to say against it?
No. Well, yeah, so...
It's not necessary, but I give you the last word.
Yes,
Yeah, so at this point, we agree. We can continue with that in the back of our minds.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I go to my second issue, which is also a theoretical issue. And it can be summarized in the question, what is competent? What does it mean when we say someone is competent? You have a very, very, very broad definition of competence, and it looks like everybody is always competent. Even young children from the youngest age are competent. And my point is, my definition says that we have to clarify competent in what.
Yeah.
But you never explain competence in the sense as being able to participate in specific practices. And in my view, it is very difficult to imagine that someone can be incompetent when I follow your definition. So I'm curious to see how you demonstrate that I am wrong.
So I remember one sentence that I wrote about the children were competent rule makers. So they were competent in making rules, and they were competent and active participant in the research process. So they were competent in participating and participant in the research. So were.
But competent in the research process, what do you mean? That they are doing research themselves and helping the researcher?
In explaining what they were doing, and they really knew what they were talking about. Play was something they really knew well, so they were competent in explaining to me the topic of the thesis, I guess.
All right. So that is a part of your definition of competence, although you do not always specify what you mean when you are saying children are competent participants. I think competence to participate is a void term, because anybody can be a passive or an active participant in someone else's activity. So that's will not bring us further when we use the term in that way. So I would like to encourage you to be always to be specific about the type of competence you are talking about. And you, of course, what I am saying now is dependent on my cultural background, my theoretical background, I should say. And you may disagree with my theoretical background, because you probably may have another theoretical background. And then we can discuss whether your theory is more productive than mine, that your definition of competence is more productive than mine. And I'm trying to find out how you look at this theoretical notion of competence. And I think you have to go beyond what Corsaro says about it. So in my opinion, it's a bit of a missed chance to contribute to theory when you do not critically analyze the notion of competence in Corsaro's work that you could use in your own work. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, no, I'm happy. I go to my next question, and you already could guess that this would be one of my questions. It's about rules. In your research question, I think it was the second one, you articulated the notion of rules. The notion of rules is even part of the subtitle thesis. And in the literature, many play researchers emphasize the importance of rules as constitutive of play, of cultural practices, and of play. So it is very important to try to figure out what rules are, what kind of rules can be found in human practices, what kind of rules can be found in children's practices when they emulate adult practices, etc. But when I read your thesis, and also in your talk, I found that your the way you deal with rules is always very general. You are not making distinctions between different types of rules. Although it might be, and research demonstrates that that can be the case, it might be that children act differently to different rules of adults. In my own research, we have seen that, for example, the use of conceptual rules, and for these young children is mostly about counting and how to deal with numbers and quantities, etc. And the children, particularly when they are in the ages of 4, 5, 6, sometimes ask help how to deal with rules. For example, when they are playing in a shoe shop and they have to pay, and they want to figure out how much they have to pay back when the shoes cost 8 euros and the customer pays 10, that kind of things. I never encountered a child that rejected adults' rules of a conceptual type. I'm sure there must be very clever young children who can do it, have ideas about conceptual rules, but most of the time they are not rejecting them or whatever. They do reject strategic rules sometimes, and, for example, propose another plan. When the teacher says they should do it this way, children say, no, that's not okay. We are doing it in another way. That's a strategic rule. Or who will be the father, who will be the mother, who will be the dog, who will be the baby, who will be the sister. That's also a strategic rule, a rule of how we are going to play. And that's a type of rule that children can have different ideas about. So my point is drawing conclusions about how children perceive adults' rules and how they react to it. That's part of your research, is dependent on the type of rules. And I think you missed the opportunity to be more specific about it and indeed contribute to our knowledge about how rules function in children's play. And I wondered all the time, and you must have good reasons, so that is my question. I wondered all the time why you remain so general in your treatment of the notion of rules. So I wonder, what are the reasons that you were not very specific and missed a chance to contribute to that part of children's play?
So at the beginning, I was looking into children's play, and then by using Corsaro's theory, I so the primary and secondary adjustment in children's play, that is the rule the educators make, and then the rule the children make, and how they challenge and circumvent and the rules. So by using Corsaro's theory, I discussed rules from adult, what the rules adult makes, and then the rule the children make. So, and this was from the children's viewpoint. So they did not. Usually they did not discuss this as rules. It was something that I noticed when going into the data.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So you stick very closely to what you found and observed in children when they are discussing rules.
Yeah.
And you think that that's a good idea? But even looking at children, you can try to figure out, try to figure out whether it's mainly social rules or technical rules or strategic rules or conceptual rules. But you didn't?
No, I did not categorize the rules or go from, no, I did not. So.
And it never came to your mind that it might be an interesting?
No, not from the perspective I was looking from, no.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay. So again, you see that it's very productive to follow a theory, but you always have to be critical on what the theory brings you. But every theory, mine too, has blind spots.
Yeah.
And that's our task as academics, to find these blind spots and color them and detail them, etc. So I found it a pity that you did not be more specific on the type of rules that children use.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have another question about rules, but then it's the rules that you may have used or not. I don't know. That's basically my question. The rules that you may have used when you are using the camera in the classroom. I couldn't find any list of rules for the footage. How long do you look at children? At what moment do you switch from a child to the group, or from the group to the child, from one child to another child? So every person using a camera has to make decisions all the time, zooming in, zooming out, focusing on one child, another child, the whole group, individual child, etc. And the problematic thing here is that it might take the form of event sampling. So just focusing on children that verify your ideas. Just focusing on children that show behavior that can be part of the answer to your research question. So, and I think every academic using a camera should be aware of the problems here, because it might turn out to be very subjective and biased even to the questions that you want to get answered. So in using the camera, you can focus on children who are doing especially those things that you think, yes, that's what I think is the answer to my question. So my question now for you is, did you have specific rules? Which were they? And if not, do you see the danger of bias in not using explicit rules for the footage?
Yeah, so the activities I focused on was the children's freely chosen activities. And so usually I was in one room with the children, and usually I was recording a group of children in one area at a time. So I was not zooming into one child.
All right.
Yeah, so
Okay.
I was always, usually that was a group or at one table or so, and then the children that were observed in the recording, they were invited to watch it. So I never zoomed at one child or
Okay.
so.
Okay. Well, it would have been very informative for me to know that. You use this rule consistently,
Yeah.
only focusing on groups and staying on these groups.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a clear answer. So that satisfies me, but I hope you also agree that if you made another choice, it wouldn't have been bad per se, but we must realize that zooming in or out or changing from one to another might introduce bias, but you avoided it by following consistently one rule. Good, thank you. Yeah. But I'm now hesitating myself. Whether I should ask this question about children's perspectives. It seems to me that you have an idea of a child's perspective on reality, on adults, etc., can be a pure perspective of this one child. Is that correct, or am I wrong?
I don't understand what you mean, sorry.
Do you think that the child's perspective is what we call polyphonic? So it's always populated by different voices of adults or other peers, etc. So there is no pure perspective of this one child. So it's always mixed with other points of view in our heads.
Yeah. So, yeah, I started with the idea that children's perspectives are multi-voiced. And yes, and they have different perspectives, and I can agree with you on that. But when they discussed play with me, they were very like, I don't know what word I can use for it. They were really like, don't you know what I mean? This is play. And they were always referring to the imaginary situation. So I was like, I thought, even though I think children have different perspectives, they had this common view on play. So, yeah.
Yes. And with regard to play, I'm just trying to understand what you have in mind. With this idea of play, children only have this peer culture idea of play? Can they have an adult idea of play? Can they have a private idea of play? Or is it always a peer culture idea of play?
No, it's not. But it's how I looked at it in the preschool setting. So it was in the peer culture, yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised, and that's the background of my questioning, that you interpreted the article of Tertolen. You probably say in English Tertolen.
Yeah,
that you quote on page 57 by saying that she accepts the idea of private conceptions of play in different children. Children vary in their idea of play. But that's not in the article. So I wondered how you came to this conclusion. And you say, well, this is different from what I mean. And I read this part of your text on the bottom of page 57, I think 5 times. And I couldn't really understand what you were trying to say there.
I think this is...
Can you help me out?
Yeah, so I think what I was trying to say there is what I'm explaining to you now. That I believe that children's perspectives are multi-voiced, but when discussing play, they also have common views of things.
Sure, but they also have adult views when they are discussing play.
Yeah, in some parts, yeah, but
some parts, yes.
But when the adults in the setting asked the children to go play, they said, go choose assignments, go choose an activity. They never used the word play for what the children were doing. So that was something the children themselves, that differed a bit from the discussion of play in the setting. And that's why I thought they had these independent views of the activity.
Yeah, that's interesting, because you also know that children can have very odd reasons to call something play. It's Monday, and we always play on Monday, so it must be play.
So I refer to an Australian study which indicate that we do play on Monday, and then the children call the activities play, and then we do work on Wednesdays, and then the children name the activity work. But that was not what I saw in my study. So they had really independent views of the activity, not using the educator's language.
Great. Thank you for clarifying this for me, because it was not clear when I read your text 5 times. My last question. And it's probably very easy for you to explain. So in section 5.1 you write, and now I quote, the children who decided to participate in the study gave their written informed assent. See attachment E. So my question is about ethics. In your study you explain that you were working with children from 3 to 6. At first I couldn't read the Icelandic forms of consent or assent requests. You translated them for me. Now I know what's in the request. And still I have the feeling and the question, how did the children of 3 and 4-year-old read or write? Can they read in Iceland at the age of 3 or 4? No, I expected that. How could they extract the meaning from this text? Can you explain how this works?
So first of all, I explained the study to the children before I showed up with that paper. So I sat down with small groups of children and asked them if they knew what research was, and tried to explain with their words to what I was intended to do, and how they could decide to take part, and they could always decide to opt out, and all kinds of and I did that after I got to know the children. And then after I had explained the study to the children, I read the text for them, and put a mark on the on the paper if they wanted to take part. So.
But what reason do you have that the children really, these 3 and 4 year olds, especially 3 year olds, that they really understood what you asked from them? I think there is a lot of secondary adjustment going on there.
There was a lot of secondary adjustment. And
did you check it?
Yeah. So when the girls threw me out of the room, I thought, well, they said yes that they wanted to take part, and then they challenged me with different kinds of behavior to say, no, we don't want this now. So they also used the secondary adjustment in the my role.
But I miss the ethics now in your explanation, that children can do different things and try to do things that you did not intend to yourself, etc.
Yeah.
But what is the ethic element there then?
Yeah. So I guess after explaining to them the study and playing taking on at least adult role, they were really, I found that they used their rights to opt out at any time. So if they were going outside playing and they rather wanted to go outside, they just said no. They often said no to me. So I guess the explanation, so writing their name on the paper did not mean that they were could not opt out afterwards. So they knew that also.
You think that's ethical? As my for the children to let them sign a letter that they probably do not understand in all its implications?
This is one way of trying to showing the children respect and that they have choices and they can they can decide if they sign the paper or not. So
that's the point.
Yeah.
Do they sign it or not?
Yeah.
Okay.
So some of them did not, and some of them did, and some of them did right away, and some of them waited some time and then came to me and say, "Oh, I want to take part." So.
Yeah. I think this point emphasizes again what my colleague Elizabeth Wood already said in her questioning. Ethics is not an issue that you do in the beginning, but it must be done permanently in every moment, every interaction with children, and especially with the 3-year-olds. That's the most important part of the ethical agreement with the children. And I think this letter in the beginning is a formality. But with all respect, I do not see much additional value of this, except for the observation whether they are ready to sign or not. But I hope that I will never have to sign important documents under conditions that I may not completely understand what is written there. And when you grow older, that kind of dangers are real. Okay, you helped me very much with a better understanding of your thesis and your research. Those were my questions. And I think the regulations of the whole ceremony will explain what we have to do now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I thank you, Dr. Bert van Oors, for your thorough and enlightening examination of the thesis and the candidate for her replies to the questions posed by the opponent. The proceedings are for the moment adjourned, and I, as a chair of the proceedings and the opponents, and the Dean of School of Education, will now retire to pass judgment on whether the oral defense of the thesis has been satisfactory. Ég bið fólk að halda kyrru fyrir í salnum á meðan. Í þessa bók hefur verið skráð að doktorsvörn Sara Margrét Ólafsdóttir hefur farið fram á fullnægjandi hátt. Ég bið þig, Sara Margrét Ólafsdóttir, að rísa á fætur og hlýða á niðurstöðu okkar. Doktorspróf Sara Margrét Ólafsdóttir hinn 22. febrúar 2019. Menntavísindasviði deild kennslu og menntunarfræði hefur tekið ritgerð Söru Margrétar Ólafsdóttur, leikur barna í leikskólum, viðhorf íslenska leikskólabarna til leiks, regna í leik og hlutverk leikskólakennara í leik þeirra á ensku, Children's Play in Peer Cultures, Icelandic Preschool Children's Views on Play, Rules in Play and the Role of Educators in their Play, gilda til varnar fyrir doktorspróf í kennslu og menntunarfræði. Vörnin hefur farið fram í heyranda hljóði og hún tekin gild. Því lýsum við því yfir að Sara Margrét Ólafsdóttir með réttu doktor í menntavísindum, filosofí, doktorum in scientia pedagogica frá Háskóla Íslands. Þetta sé góðu heiti gjört og vitað. Ég sæmi því Sara Margrét Ólafsdóttir, doktor í menntavísindum frá Háskóla Íslands, sé það góðu heilli gjört og vitað. Doktor Sara Margrét Ólafsdóttir, til hamingju. Nú mun ný doktorinn taka til máls.
I would like to begin by thanking the opponents, Professor Elizabeth Unroot and Professor Bert van Owers, for reading my work, opening my eyes for new and important perspectives, and for constructive discussions today. I thank the Head of Faculty of Education and Pedagogy for chairing this ceremony and the Dean of School of Education. I thank the University of Iceland for honoring me with a doctoral degree, and I wish the university all the best. Each member of the doctoral committee also deserves my profound gratitude and respect. First, I would like to thank Dr. Jóhanna Einarsdóttir, professor at the University of Iceland, for her outstanding support and guidance throughout the study. Moreover, by affording me opportunities to become involved in national and international research, she has given me unexpected professional connections and experiences which promise to benefit me for years to come. Next, I want to thank my co-supervisor, Dr. Susan Denby, professor at the Queensland University of Technology in Brisbane, Australia, whose various kinds of support and guidance have made my learning journey meaningful. Last, I want to thank Dr. Marianne Theobald, also at the Queensland University of Technology, for sharing her knowledge and experiences with me during my research, and along with Susan for giving me a lovely welcome when visiting their university. And now I want to change into Icelandic and say a few words. Jæja, þá þetta ferðalag senn á enda. Já, þetta búið að vera heljarinnar ferðalag. Þegar ég byrjaði í doktorsnámi síðla árs 2013, vissi ég í raun ekki út í hvað ég var að fara. Ég hafði hlotið doktorsstyrk frá Rannsóknarsjóði Eimskipafélags Íslands sem gerði mig kleift að hefja þetta ferðalag og ég þakklát fyrir það. Það sem ég var nokkuð viss var að áhugi minn á rannsóknum á menntun ungra barna og hvatning frá fólkinu í kringum mig myndi leiða mig áfram. Ég kynntist mikið af fólki á þessu ferðalagi og lærði mjög margt af því. Ég var svo heppin að fá tækifæri til að ferðast heiminn og taka þátt í alþjóðlegu rannsóknarsamstarfi. Í þessum ferðalögum lærði ég betur hversu mikilvægt að njóta ferðarinnar en ekki að einblína bara á áfangastaðinn. Síðust ár hef ég reynt að njóta þessa ferðalags að vera námsmaður, þó það hafi oft verið krefjandi. En ég verð að viðurkenna að ég mjög glöð að vera komin á áfangastað í þessu ferðalagi. En þrátt fyrir það lít ég svo á að þessi áfangastaður bara upphafið að nýju ferðalagi. Mér langar að þakka þeim fjölmörgu sem hafa stutt mig á einhvern hátt á þessari vegferð, en það yrði of langt mál að telja þá alla upp hér. Ég vil byrja á því að þakka börnum og starfsfólki í leikskólana sem tóku þátt í rannsókninni. Án þeirra stæði ég ekki hér í dag. Börnunum þakka ég sérstaklega fyrir að bjóða mér að taka þátt í samfélagi þeirra og kenna mér ýmislegt þátttöku þeirra í leik og starfi. Þau gáfu mér tækifæri til að skilja betur leikskólastarfið frá þeirra eigin sjónarhorni. Ég vil þakka samferðafólki mín í alþjóðlegu rannsóknateyminu Poet. Það kenndi mér meðal annars á hinn stóra heim rannsókna þar sem virðing fyrir fólki í fyrirrúmi, bæði í orði og á borði. Næst vil ég þakka samstarfsfólki mínu og doktorsnemum á Menntavísindasviði fyrir hvatningu og stuðning í gegnum árin. Stuðningur ykkar hefur verið mér ómetanlegur. Að lokum vil ég þakka fjölskyldu minni og vinum fyrir skilningin, stuðningin og hvatninguna. Ég vil sérstaklega þakka börnunum mínum 3, Elísu, Ólafi Þór og Viktor Orra, fyrir að vera þolinmóð og skilningsrík í gegnum allt ferlið. Takk fyrir.
Ég þakka hennum nýja doktor, Söru Margrét Ólafsdóttir, fyrir kynningu sína og vörn ritgerðarinnar. Andmælendum þakka ég fyrir uppbyggilegar athugasemdir og spurningar og ykkur ágætu gestir þakka ég fyrir komuna. Við á Menntavísindasviði og deild kennslu á menntunarfræði erum stolt af árangri þínum, doktor Sara Margrét. Fyrir hönd sviðs og deildar óskaði ég hjartanlega til hamingju. Gestir eru vinsamlega beðnir að halda kyrru fyrir á meðan nýdoktor, andmælendur, deildarforseti og sviðsforseti ganga út.